She was the shy girl no one noticed, until the day she confessed her love to a man on his way out of town. With nothing but silence in return, she thought her words had vanished into the fog forever. In the coastal town of Delshore, where the fog rolled in like a gentle whisper each morning, lived a girl who rarely spoke above one. Mira Ellison, 24, was the kind of person who blended into the background like the worn pages of a library book. Her skin was a smooth almond brown, her eyes hazel and always thoughtful, hidden slightly behind the round bronze-rimmed glasses that perched on her nose. Her hair, thick and coiled, was usually tied back in a red scarf, part habit, part comfort. She lived with her mother, Ruth, in a cottage that smelled of sea salt and chamomile tea. Mira spent her days at the Delshore Public Library, helping Ms. Tallman, the aging head librarian, catalog books and led children's story time. She loved the smell of paper and ink, the quiet rustle of pages flipping, the peaceful solitude of being surrounded by stories that didn't ask anything of her. But for months now, there had been one story she couldn't escape: Drive Isaac Vale, the young town physician. Isaac, 28, was a tall, sharply dressed man with olive skin, silvering temples and weary gray eyes that held storms behind them. He came to Delshore 2 years ago after a personal tragedy, offering care without ever revealing his pain. Mira admired him from afar, watched how he listened to old fishermen talk about their arthritis, how he smiled gently at children terrified of vaccines. He made her feel seen in small ways, a nod when she passed the clinic, a thank you when she donated books. But now there were whispers. Isaac was leaving Delshore, a new opportunity, a fresh start. Mira's heart twisted every time she overheard it. Something inside her knew. If she didn't tell him now, she never would. And so she wrote him a letter, and then tore it up, then another, and another, until finally she made up her mind to speak. With trembling fingers and her notebook pressed tight to her chest, she stepped out into the fog of the coming morning. The old Delshore bus station loomed ahead like a crossroad, and her heart was the only passenger that mattered. The old bus station on the edge of Delshore hadn't changed in decades. Its cracked cement platform, weather-worn benches and faded signs bore the history of countless hellos and even more goodbyes. That morning, the air was heavy with mist, thick enough to turn breath into visible clouds. Mira stood beneath the corroded shelter, notebook clutched against her chest, her red scarf pulled tight around her neck like a lifeline. The clock above the station doors ticked with agonizing slowness. Isaac Vale, dressed in a dark overcoat and holding a worn leather duffel, stood near the edge of the platform. His gaze was distant, locked on the rolling hills beyond town. His posture was straight, but Mira could see the slump in his shoulders, like a man carrying invisible weight. Her boots crunched on the gravel as she approached. "Isaac," she called out, barely louder than the wind. He turned, surprised to see her. His expression shifted from curiosity to concern. "Mira?" She struggled to breathe. Her palms were damp, her legs nearly buckling beneath her. But something stronger held her upright, her truth. "I know this is sudden," she began, voice trembling, "but I don't want you to leave without knowing. I love you." The words dropped between them like a stone into still water. Isaac blinked, visibly stunned. He opened his mouth, then closed it again. Behind them, the sound of the approaching bus grew louder, grinding against the stillness of the moment. "I don't expect anything," she added quickly, tears threatening to spill. "I just needed to tell you." A horn blared, the bus doors opened. Isaac glanced at her, at the bus and back again. "Mira, but the driver called out, "Last call for westbound." Without finishing his sentence, Isaac gave her a sorrowful look, slung his bag over his shoulder and stepped onto the bus. Mira stood frozen as the doors hissed shut and the engine roared back to life. Her heart felt like it had been left behind on the platform. She watched the bus disappear into the mist, clutching her notebook like a shield. Her love had finally spoken, but the silence it left behind was louder than she could bear. The morning after Isaac left, Mira awoke to the sound of gulls outside her window and an ache in her chest that didn't fade with the dawn. The silence in the house was suffocating. Ruth, her mother, moved quietly through the kitchen, giving her space. She understood heartbreak. She'd worn it once too, long before Mira was born. Mira didn't cry, not yet. Instead, she went through the motions, making tea, walking to the library, cataloging books. But everything felt different. The sea breeze was colder, the books heavier, the town quieter, as if it had collectively exhaled a breath it didn't realize it was holding. At night she sat by her bedroom window, her notebook resting on her lap. And she wrote, not for Isaac, not at first, but for herself. She poured out the words she couldn't say at the station, her fears, her hopes. The way he smiled when he stitched up a child's scraped knee, the softness in his voice when he spoke about distant cities, places she only dreamed of. Letter after letter, she filled page after page, sealing them in envelopes she never addressed. Ruth found one lying on the table one morning, her name scribbled at the top. She didn't open it, but she smiled faintly. then placed a hand on Myra's shoulder. "Sometimes it's not about whether they read it, it's about whether you've said it." Myra nodded, too choked up to speak. She didn't know what to do with all the emotions inside her, but she knew one thing. She couldn't live her life in waiting. She'd confessed her love. Now she needed to find a reason to keep living without it. The next night she placed all her unsent letters in a wooden box, tied it with twine, and slid it beneath her bed. Her heart was broken, but it was still hers. The Colmar Mountains stretched like solemn sentinels across the northern edge of the region, cold, jagged, and distant. It was here that Dr. Isaac Vale had chosen to disappear. The clinic he now worked at was buried deep in a frost-covered village few maps bothered to mark. The only sounds were the wind brushing through the evergreens and the low crackle of firewood in the cabin stove. The air was thin, the silence heavy, but Isaac welcomed it. Each day he treated miners with battered lungs, children with winter sores, and elders with stories that meandered longer than their heartbeats. His hands moved expertly, stitching wounds and mixing herbal salves, but his mind wandered, not to medicine, to her. Myra he hadn't meant to leave like that, not without saying more, but her words had overwhelmed him. In a town where everything had once felt temporary, her confession had landed like permanence, and permanence frightened him more than he could admit. At night he sat in the wooden cabin, hunched over a worn desk. A single candle flickered beside a blank page. He had tried to write to her once, but he had no right, not after leaving the way he did. Still, something stirred inside him every time he remembered her voice, so fragile, so brave, her eyes wide with hope and heartbreak, and the way she had clutched that notebook like it carried her soul inside. He tried to tell himself that leaving was for the best, that Myra was better off without a man weighed down by grief. But the truth echoed louder with each passing night. He had been running not just from the town or the memory of his brother's death, but from her, and what scared him most was how much he still didn't want to let her go. The calm rhythm of Delshore was abruptly interrupted one blustery afternoon by the arrival of an outsider, someone who clearly didn't belong among the weather-worn buildings and cobbled streets. Her heels, a glossy sky blue, clicked impatiently on the uneven pavement. Her hair, a cascade of golden waves, didn't move in the coastal wind as much as it challenged it. Her name was Sabrina Marsh, and she walked like someone who owned the room before she entered it. Myra spotted her first while helping Ms. Tallman rearrange books in the library window. The sight of the sleek black car parked outside the general store was enough to stir the townspeople's curiosity. But the moment Sabrina stepped out, clutching a leather handbag worth more than Myra's monthly salary, rumors bloomed like wildfire. Sabrina approached the Ellison home that evening, the heels now in her hand and a pair of flats in place. Though even in borrowed comfort she stood like a queen, she introduced herself curtly at the door. "I'm here for Isaac Vale," she said, brushing her perfectly tailored blazer. "He asked me to collect his things. I'm his fiancée." Myra blinked, barely understanding the words. Ruth, ever the gracious host, invited her in with a tight smile. But Myra stood motionless, heart lurching in her chest. Sabrina surveyed the house with a kind of amused detachment, then added, "You must be Myra. He mentioned someone quiet. It wasn't an insult, but it stung like one." Myra nodded, though she couldn't meet Sabrina's eyes. She helped her gather Isaac's few belongings from the old clinic and pack them into a suitcase. Every folded shirt, every medical book felt like a goodbye she hadn't prepared for. She didn't cry in front of Sabrina, but her hands trembled as she sealed the last zipper. That night the silence in the house was unbearable. Myra lay awake staring at the ceiling. The image of Sabrina's confident smirk burned into her mind. Was Isaac truly engaged? Had her confession meant nothing at all? It wasn't just heartbreak she felt now, it was humiliation, and a deep aching need to reclaim something of herself before she lost everything. The morning after Sabrina left, the house was silent except for the ticking of the kitchen clock and the occasional creak of floorboards. Myra sat at the small wooden table with her box of unsent letters. She untied the twine slowly, fingers brushing the envelopes like fragile memories. They were written in every kind of emotion, some pages shaky with tears, others steady with hope. But one letter, incomplete and wrinkled, caught her eye. It read, "If you ever return, I hope it's not too late for me to." The sentence trailed off, ending in a blot of ink. Myra didn't remember why she'd stopped writing. Perhaps she'd been interrupted, or maybe her courage had run out. Either way, it was unfinished, and in that moment, Myra realized something. This story was unfinished too. That night she carried the box to the old lighthouse cliff, and buried it beneath the roots of a tree overlooking the sea. Not to forget, but to release. The letters had served their purpose. They had taught her that her voice mattered, even if no one heard it. That same evening she pulled out a clean page and began again, not writing to Isaac but to herself. Myra's life began to shift slowly, like the tide changing its rhythm. The girl who once waited by the window now walked confidently through Delshore's winding streets. Inspired by Isaac's long-ago suggestion and her mother's quiet encouragement, she enrolled in a local health outreach training program. It was designed for rural communities, places just like hers, and Myra saw it as her way forward. She wore her red scarf, not as a symbol of comfort anymore, but of purpose. Her outfits grew bolder. Mustard yellow sweaters, green skirts, even a deep plum cardigan she'd once deemed too loud. She visited elderly neighbors to check blood pressure, taught children about hand-washing, and started holding basic health awareness sessions outside the library. People began calling her Miss Myra with respect in their voices. The baker gifted her extra bread loaves. The butcher taught her how to wrap wounds. Every day she felt herself growing into someone whole. One afternoon, she stood in front of a town meeting and gave a speech on water sanitation. Her voice didn't shake, her hands didn't tremble. When she walked off stage, Ruth hugged her with pride. Myra had once confessed love. Now she was falling in love with herself, with her work, and with a life she never imagined possible. Back in the Colmar Mountains, Isaac found himself facing a life-or-death emergency. A young boy from a distant logging village had been brought to the clinic with a severe fever and convulsions. With no backup, no modern equipment, and a storm looming, Isaac worked through the night. He administered medicine by candlelight, improvising tools and rationing supplies. His fingers were raw, his clothes soaked with sweat. When dawn finally broke and the boy began to stabilize, Isaac collapsed in a chair, exhausted. The boy's mother clutched Isaac's hands with tears in her eyes. "Thank you for coming back," she said in broken English. The words jolted him. Coming back? Back to where? To life, to purpose, to love. That night Isaac sat by the fire in silence. He opened an old journal and began writing, not medical notes, but confessions. About Myra, about his fear, about the guilt that had shadowed him since his brother's death, which he'd carried like a badge of penance. But now he realized something profound. He didn't have to live his whole life punishing himself to feel worthy of being loved. He looked out the window at the snow-covered trees and whispered aloud, "It's time to go home." Back in Delshore, Myra organized a health fair in the town square. Colorful booths lined the street. Local artists painted faces. Children played tug-of-war while parents sampled fruit pies. Myra floated from station to station with a clipboard in hand and a purposeful stride. Her confidence, once tucked away in silence, now radiated with every smile she gave. As the event wound down, a murmur moved through the crowd. A sleek black limousine pulled onto the gravel path near the main platform. Its polished windows gleamed under the setting sun. Myra's heart skipped. No, it couldn't be. The door opened and Isaac Vale stepped out. He looked different, more rested. His hair was shorter, his posture more relaxed. He wore a navy suit, crisp and clean, with a pin of a white dove on the lapel. The crowd stared in silence. Isaac climbed onto the stage where Myra had spoken days earlier. He cleared his throat. "I left Delshore not knowing who I was, but I came back because I finally remembered what I'm meant to be." His eyes searched the crowd until they found hers. "I read your letters, Myra, all of them." A collective gasp rose. Myra's eyes widened, lips parting in disbelief. "I've come home," he said, "because you never left me." Isaac's voice carried across the square, clear and steady. "I was once a man who ran, from pain, from love, from truth. I thought if I kept moving I wouldn't have to face what I lost, but I was wrong. Running didn't heal me. You did, Myra. You, with your quiet strength and words I never deserved." Myra stood rooted to the cobblestones, hand clutched to her chest. She could hardly breathe. "I know what I did," Isaac continued, "and I won't ask for your forgiveness, but I will ask for a chance to build something new with you." Silence blanketed the square. Then a small voice, Mrs. Fenny, the baker, whispered, "Say something, dear." Myra stepped forward, cheeks flushed, eyes full. "I spent months writing to someone I thought had forgotten me," she said, voice soft but sure. "But those letters weren't for him. They were for me. So I could remember who I was." She turned to Isaac. "You don't get to rewrite the past, but maybe we can write the next page together." The crowd burst into applause, but Myra only saw him and the tears in his storm-gray eyes. Later that evening, the two of them sat on a bench outside the library. The same one where Myra had once read to children on rainy days. Now she sat beside Isaac, her scarf fluttering gently in the breeze. "I never expected you to come back," she said, looking at her hands. "I didn't either," he admitted. "But something in me wouldn't let go of you, and when I read your letters, I saw the woman I never had the courage to love the way she deserved." Myra's eyes welled up. "You hurt me, Isaac. When you walked away, it felt like you took the last piece of my heart." "I know," he whispered. "And I'll spend the rest of my life giving you reasons not to regret letting me back in." She turned to him slowly. "Then don't say it, show me, day by day, not with grand gestures, with truth." He nodded. "That's all I want." And in that moment something shifted. Their love, once fragile and uncertain, began to take root in solid ground built not on longing but on trust. Isaac moved back into town, not into a luxury home, but into the modest back room of the old Delshore clinic. It was dusty and cramped, but it suited him. Together, he and Mira reopened the space as a walk-in health center, offering affordable services and public wellness classes. Mira no longer walked behind him. She walked beside him, clipboard in hand, a confident smile lighting her face. They held hands between appointments, laughed over burnt tea, and argued over where to place new equipment. Isaac found joy in teaching Mira stitches and listening to her explain how she'd improved sanitation awareness in local schools. They were equals now, partners in both healing and life. At night they watched the sea from the lighthouse cliff. Sometimes they spoke about their past. Other times they sat in silence, content just to exist beside each other. One night Isaac squeezed her hand and said, "You saved me, not just at the bus station but every day after." Mira looked up, eyes shimmering. "You saved me too, by leaving, because it made me find the part of myself I was always afraid to be." Spring arrived early that year. The cliffside garden Mira tended, full of wild lavender, rosemary, and sea daffodils, blossomed in bursts of color. While tending her plants one morning, she noticed something buried in the soil near the old tree, the same spot where she had once hidden her letters. Curious, she dug with her hands, uncovering the wooden box she had buried months ago. Inside, her letters were neatly folded, but beside them lay something new. A small velvet ring box. Her breath caught as Isaac stepped into the clearing behind her, dressed in his navy coat, eyes nervous and tender. "I hoped you'd find it," he said. Mira opened the ring box slowly. Inside was a delicate silver band with a tiny engraving of a lighthouse and tree, a symbol of their journey. "I found the part of me I thought I'd lost," he said, falling to one knee. "And it's you. Will you marry me?" Mira knelt beside him, tears spilling onto her cheeks. "You didn't just come back," she whispered. "You grew with me." She kissed him, hands around his face. "Yes, yes, I will." They chose to marry under the great willow tree beside the library, the heart of Delshore. It had stood through generations of storms and sun, just like the love they'd built. The entire town came together to help plan the wedding. Ruth oversaw the decorations with ribbons and white lanterns. Ms. Tallman offered hand-bound paper cranes. The children Mira once read to rehearsed a poem to recite. Myra's dress was vintage cream lace, simple and graceful. She tied her red scarf into a sash around her waist. Isaac wore a tailored navy suit with the lighthouse cufflinks she'd given him. "I want the ceremony to feel like the life we've built," Mira said to the townspeople. "Quiet, steady, and real." And it did. The willows swayed as if blessing them, and every corner of the square glowed with the warmth of a love that had endured doubt, distance, and time. Under the green canopy of the willow, Mira and Isaac stood hand in hand. "I promise to stay even when I'm scared," Isaac said, voice trembling with emotion. "To speak even when it's hard. To love you without needing you to shrink." Mira looked into his eyes. "I promise not to wait in silence ever again. I will speak my truth, and I will walk beside you, not behind." Their vows were not elaborate. They were rooted in everything they had lived. They kissed as the crowd clapped and the town bell rang. Children threw petals. Ruth wept openly. And Isaac, for the first time in years, smiled without a shadow behind it. Married life brought quiet joys. They shared breakfasts on the porch, clinic shifts in the afternoon, and long evening walks. Their cottage was modest, with bookshelves in every room and fresh flowers on the windowsill. Mira continued her health work, launching programs in neighboring towns. Isaac began mentoring young medics and wrote articles on rural healthcare. But they never forgot to pause, to dance barefoot in the rain or read poetry by candlelight. Their love no longer lived in whispers or in spoken feelings. It lived in actions, in commitment, and in peace. One rainy evening a knock echoed through their home. Isaac opened the door to find Sabrina Marsh, drenched, mascara smudged, no heels in sight. "I didn't come to make a scene," she said quietly. "I came to say I'm sorry." Mira, ever graceful, invited her in and offered tea. Sabrina admitted she'd exaggerated her relationship with Isaac out of loneliness. "I saw what he meant to you, and I envied that." Mira smiled gently. "You deserve to be loved too, but not by someone else's story." Sabrina nodded, finally at peace. When she left, it wasn't with bitterness but gratitude. Months later, Mira and Isaac unveiled the Ellison Vale Wellness Hall in Delshore. It stood beside the library and housed medical supplies, education rooms, and a small garden. During the opening, Mira spoke to a crowd of neighbors. "This isn't just a clinic. It's proof that healing isn't only for wounds, it's for hearts too." Isaac squeezed her hand, pride shining in his eyes. The children recited their poem, and Ruth beamed with pride. They had come full circle, not just as individuals, but as a couple who rebuilt their lives together. On a quiet winter morning, Mira returned to the lighthouse alone. She dug up the wooden box one last time and unfolded the unfinished letter. "If you ever return, I hope it's not too late for me to," she smiled, tears forming. Then she added to it, "For me to be whole, for us to begin again, for love to finally arrive, not as a storm but as home." She placed it back, reburied the box, and let the wind carry her whispered words out to sea. Every anniversary they returned to the willow tree with letters written for each other. Their hair turned silver, their steps slowed, but their love never did. "You were the letter I never sent," Mira once told him. "And you," Isaac replied, "were the answer I never believed I deserved." Surrounded by family, friends, and the town they had helped heal, they lived their days not in longing, but in legacy, and under that great willow tree they left behind a story not of perfect love but of true love. If you believe in second chances, quiet strength, and love that grows from within, then this story was for you. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more soul-stirring stories that remind us all. Sometimes the love we wait for is the love we must first give ourselves.